Okay, welcome everybody to this Police and Crime Panel meeting. I'm Ewan Walter, the Senior Democratic Services Officer at Leicestershire County Council and Secretariat for the panel. So just to remind everybody, this meeting is being broadcast live via YouTube. So when you're speaking, if you could please turn your microphone on, and then when you finish, turn the microphone off so the people watching the webcast can hear you all. With regards to panel membership, we're going to have a detailed report at the later meeting regards panel membership, but just a few things to mention. We've got a couple of new members this year. We've got Councillor Knight from Harborough. Welcome to you. We've got Councillor Daywood from Leicester City Council. With a few apologies. Sarah Russell has given her apologies, so Councillor Whittle is standing in for her today. We've also had apologies from Councillor Michael Mullaney and Kevin Lloydell. So I think that's all that business. I'll just say welcome back to Mr. Rupert Matthews as well as Police and Crime Commissioner.
Yeah, it's Councillor Dowwood.
Dowwood.
Not Day
Okay.
or a combination.
Apologies.
No problem. You're not to know. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so we'll move on with the first agenda item, which is appointment of chairman. Do I have any nominations for chairman? Mr. Phillimore?
Can I nominate Mrs. Deborah Taylor, please?
Thank you. That's a nomination for Mrs. Taylor. Do we have a seconder for Mrs. Taylor? Thank you, Mr. Woodman. And are there any other nominations for chair? I'll put that to the vote. Everybody in favour of Mrs. Taylor being appointed chair? That looks unanimous. Okay, Mrs. Taylor, you're appointed chair for the rest of the year, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for your support. Welcome back, Mr. Matthews. So the next item is appointment of vice chairman. So is there any nominations for vice chairman from anyone? Mr. Phillimore?
Councillor Sarah Russell, please.
Do we have a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chair.
Any other nominations at all? Okay, we'll put that to the vote. Everyone happy with Sarah Russell as vice chairman? I think that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Any declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda from anybody? No? Okay, we'll move on to item 4 then. So when notified of a proposed appointment under Schedule 1 of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011, it's the duty of the Police and Crime Panel to hold a public confirmation hearing and to review, make reports and recommendations in respect of the candidate. Questioning during the hearing must relate to the professional competence or personal independence of the candidate. When questioning is complete, the panel has 3 principal options as follows. 1, if the panel is content with the proposed senior appointment, it can agree to report its endorsement to the PCC. 2, where the candidate meets the standard but the panel has concerns about their suitability, such concerns can form part of the panel's report and recommendations to the PCC. Point 3, in the event that the panel determines that the candidate does not meet the requirements for the post, the panel may provide advice and recommendations accordingly to the PCC in its report. I myself will write to the PCC following the confirmation hearing to outline the decision and recommendations of the panel. The candidate will also be sent a copy of the letter. Should the recommendation be that the proposed candidate be endorsed, then the applicant can take up the post. Following a refusal recommendation by the panel, the PCC has the following options. The PCC continues with the appointment. Under these circumstances, the PCC should publicise a response focusing on why he felt the candidate did in fact meet the minimum standards for the post. The candidate can decide to withdraw, and the PCC can decide not to appoint and instead set a timetable out for a new appointment. So I'm now going to invite the PCC to explain why it's chosen the candidate for the post and the process applied. So over to you, Mr. Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, congratulations on your re-election to be chair of this panel. I trust you will, of course, continue with your excellent record of good chairmanship that we are all accustomed to. Well, I would imagine most members are familiar with Councillor Mahal, both in her work as a councillor, her chairmanship and membership of many organisations, but also, of course, she has been Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for quite some considerable time now, and has been of enormous help to me both in the fulfilment of my duties and running her own projects and doing her own work alongside me. I'm delighted to be bringing her back here to ask for her to be reconfirmed as Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. As I'm sure most of you are aware, we're still running under the old Police and Crime Plan, which was brought in 2 and a bit years ago now. I was just trying to remember the exact date. And I'm very glad that Rani Mahal has agreed to continue to provide the sort of continuity that we need to get the final stages of that Police and Crime Plan to bed, and also to help with formulating the new Police and Crime Plan, which is going to be going forwards, and in due course will come to this panel for comment in a few months' time. Also, of course, Councillor Mahal will be running her own projects as she has before, and been dealing with her own aspects of the work of Police and Crime Commissioner. So I say I found her to be absolutely invaluable and to make a great contribution to the work of the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner. So I recommend her wholeheartedly, Chair, and of course Councillor Mahal can more than talk for herself, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews, and welcome Rani to the meeting. So we'll kick off with a few questions for you. So I'll be starting. So having been in the role of the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for a period of time, what do you believe the most important aspects are, and how have you positively influenced these?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel for holding the panel meeting again for me. I think the most important thing is obviously to help the PCC to hold the force to account, to meet his strategic sort of objectives and priorities that are within the Police and Crime Plan, as stated by Mr. Matthews. And
just a couple of points about how you've positively influenced that work.
Yeah, so I make it my business to try and sort of take on as much as I can without obviously stepping on the PCC's business, and I try and fit in to complete any sort of tasks that are put forward to me, whether it's the community safety partnerships and or the chief officer team meetings that we have Monday mornings as well. So yeah, anything and everything that is required of me, I make it my a point to complete those to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Councillor Blackshaw.
Thank you, Chair. Rani, can you tell us how you demonstrate the skills and ability to carry out the responsibilities set out in the job description, Appendix D of the Commissioner's report?
Appendix D. Yeah. Obviously each task that is required of me, I complete them accordingly. I follow the path of the PCC and try and do that as best as I can. With the fact that I'm a deputy PCC, and there's certain things I can and can't do, but I will do them accordingly. And obviously I work very well with the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner staff, and I take sort of details that are required and carry them out as necessary.
But in what ways does your skill set and experience complement Mr. Matthews?
So communication, being able to listen to people, listen to the community, listen to victims of any that have suffered any issues in their past. So I'm a good listener, communication skills, and attending meetings where obviously the PCC isn't able to. So my time is obviously more available at times. PCC has his appointments that he needs to get to. But again, I'm able to sort of go out and meet people. I'm able to hold meetings in the office as well, and with my skills with media and IT, I'm able to use those skills as well. So when we're out and about, we can speak to members of the public, or to any sort of organisations that are asking any questions of us.
Thank you. And what do you believe should be the relationship between the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and the PCP?
Obviously, as the PCC holds the force to account, the panel is there to make sure that we as PCC hold our side of the bargain, if you like, to ensure that we are doing things as per the police and crime plan. So yeah, but the relationship needs to be one of sort of respect, mutual respect. Thank you.
Councillor Phillimore.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Randy.
Hi.
So you've had 12, 18 months, I think, as a DPCC. So in that time, can you explain or demonstrate to the panel a time when you have involved or engaged with stakeholders to ensure that they have been able to influence policing and crime issues?
So, I mean, I can name a couple of things. We work with the VRN for one. We had a business crime meeting at the force headquarters where local businesses were invited to deal with things, aspects like shoplifting, to bring them all together in a mutual space to discuss any concerns and issues that they have, and so that you know, any crimes that are being committed can be brought to the fore and that any solutions can be brought forward.
Thank you, Rani. So a couple of extra questions for you then, please. So given the independence of the PCC's role and his responsibility to his electorate, what examples can you give of how you have had to be accountable for the delivery of a particular policy to the general public?
So obviously I came into my role and violence against women and girls was one of them. Partnerships was another, and I forget the third for a second, but with regards to partnerships, you know, community safety partnerships is something that I've managed to sort of build up during my time here, and I think it's important for the partnerships so that the stakeholders can meet with each other and you know, resolve mutual issues that concern the communities, because at the end of the day we're working for the community and the best you know, for the best of the community.
Yeah, can I dig a little bit deeper, please? So so from those meetings and engagements, Rani, what have you taken away from those meetings and actually fed into the force or the OPC as the generic body to actually make a difference? What was that change that you delivered?
I suppose the parish council meetings that the engagement I did with parish councils across the county, not all of them attended. They were given the opportunity to attend. We had the parish council engagement sort of visits, which I did towards the you know, I think it was from February onwards. And obviously I fed that back to the office, and then obviously if, you know, for those things that could go forward already in the form of a policy will go, and anything else will obviously go towards the police and crime plan for the, you know, for the future, for the next police and crime plan. But there's quite a few things that obviously that I will go out and do, gets fed back to the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and then obviously they put it into their within their sort of corporate boards and things.
Thanks, Mary. And on that very point, you actually alluded to it right at the very beginning. So your role includes taking into account the needs of diverse and hardest to reach communities across LLR. Can you give the panel an example which demonstrates your ability to engage with this range of groups and produce tangible outcomes or results? Thank you.
So I think coming from a BAME background, if you like to call it that, I'm able to speak and engage with communities of all faiths, and I won't hesitate to go into any kind of building or organisations if it means that there is a conversation to be had. Which is important to the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, and to you know, end any crimes that are taking place, to listen to the victims. So for me, that comes naturally, speaking to people in different organisations and religious, you know, organisations as well.
So for the panel's benefit, could you just pull one out the air where you've actually been to one of those meetings, diverse audience, different backgrounds, and taken something back to the PCC, please? that 6 are thing, didn't we, in the Chariot Festival?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously with Vaisakhi, which took place in April, obviously for me it's important that the role of Police and Crime Commissioner is known by the communities out there. So for us going out into the community for whether it's Vaisakhi or Eid or you know, a religious Jewish religious festival or Easter or anything, it's important to get out there and recognise all different communities and bring that back to the office and raise awareness. It's about raising awareness of the different communities, that we are very lucky to have diverse communities in Leicester. And I think actually it's, you know, quite a nice thing, there's different communities coming together.
Okay, thank you, Rani. Thanks, Jeff.
Salma.
Hi, Rani. Please, can you provide an example that demonstrates your ability to manage change or to inspire colleagues to do things differently? And specifically, what was your role in that change process?
I think just coming into the office has been change for the staff, just to see, you know, maybe another female person in the office. And I think that having, you know, conversations with them, making sure that the office relationships are there, talking to them to allay any fears or any concerns they may have as staff as well, that sort of change. And with the violence against women and girls, that was something that had come in. We've renewed the strategy for that as well, of the changes.
Councillor Wise. Thank you. Rani, the economic situation experienced by all public sector organisations has led to a greater emphasis on partnership working and shared services, and you've mentioned partnership earlier. What experience are you bringing to the role which enables you to work with partners in an effective manner at a time of severely constrained resource?
I think this is the perfect time, because having conversations, it's important to economically we've had issues, but I think it's being diplomatic in a conversation, ensuring that, you know, mutual conversations are taking place, and bearing the economic situation in mind is important, but working with others is important, and to show them that actually working together economically you are making a saving, because you're sharing the cost of shared services, as you say. So that enables savings overall.
Can you tell us a little more about the difference between partnership working and effective partnership working? Because I can think of lots of people that would declare themselves partners, but whether that's effective is another matter.
So I mean, you can be partners, but I think where you're working together for a mutual sort of benefit, that you know, enables people to pool all the resources together and work towards that sort of joint effort of outcomes that you want to meet, rather than, you know, partnerships just for the sake of partnerships.
Can you provide an example which demonstrates your ability to strategically plan and collaborate with partner agencies?
I think as soon as I came on board, it took some time, obviously, but the strategic partnership board that I'm on involves all the different districts and stakeholders, and those were some of the meetings that I sat on during my time previously when I was appointed.
Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Rani. Can you explain your understanding of the terms operational independence and personal independence?
So personally, anything that take the force, for example, what they do operationally is nothing to do with, you know, DPCC. It's their operational things that they have to do. We can do what we as a Police and Crime Commissioner and or Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner need to do. So we must ensure that we don't step into that operational sort of boundary, if you like. And so it's important to let the police force have that operational independence, but making sure that they are held to account in other ways.
Sorry, and the second one, which is the personal independence.
So personal independent, obviously, I am my own person, and I will take into account what's happening and make up my own mind as to which way I feel. So as a woman, I feel like a bit more of like an intuitive feel. So you go with what's right for you as a personal level.
And those two levels of independence, how do they apply to the relationship between the OPCC's office and the Chief Constable, and how the separation of powers should be maintained?
Sorry, could you break that down for me?
Yeah, of course, break it down for you. So you've explained those two levels of independence. How do they apply to the relationship between the office of the OPCC and the relationship with the Chief Constable? And then the separation of powers, how are they maintained in that sense?
So although the OPCC and the force headquarters are both in the same building, we have our own sort of separations, if you like, financially, and our own sort of ability to form our own sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Our own sort of agendas, if you like, but coming out with the mutual sort of what we're trying to provide to the community from a crime point of view.
I think you've got the next question as well. So,
how would you handle a situation where the PCC wanted to follow a particular course of action, but you personally felt that was unwise?
I would have a conversation with the PCC and make him aware of my feelings, and then make the call as best as I thought, according to my own ability. I would have a word with the PCC, or a chat with the PCC.
And there's got to be a follow-up to that one. How far would you pursue that, giving your advice where it might be unwelcome?
I think it all depends on what the actual point is and how important it is at that time, as to how far I would go. Yeah, absolutely.
that's Robin.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Ronnie. How do you ensure that you act fairly across the county, city and Rutland to ensure they get equal focus in the role of DPPC?
So going back to the parish council engagements, we ensured that we visited and gave the opportunity to all the parish councils to come forward, and gave equal time to all parish councillors that came to meet us, and meetings were held in exactly the same way. The questions were set in exactly the same way, and for me, Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, it's three different parts, but they're all equal to me, and I think each area deserves the equal amount of attention.
Okay, you'll be pleased to hear this is the final question. So at the end of your term of office, how will we know whether you have been a success, and on what criteria should we judge your performance in the role?
Thank you. So although I might not have answered your questions as maybe you'd expected, but with the last appointment, I went away having dealt with my various portfolios, and coming back, it's almost like, as they say, riding a bicycle and you never forget, or swimming and you don't forget. As soon as I came back into the office, I felt like I was just continuing with what I'd left behind, and I was eager to get a start on again. So I would like to think that we will have a successful police and crime plan at the end of it, which will go ahead and have a successful outcome.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of all the questions and the end of the public part of the hearing. So I now move that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves a likely disclosure exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1973, and in all circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exception outweighs the public's interest in disclosing the information. And we all agree to go into a private session. Okay, we'll just wait for the webcast to return. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the Leicestershire and Rutland Police and Crime panel. Just to note, this meeting will be filmed for live or subsequent broadcast via the council website. Notices will be on display at the meeting explaining the arrangements. So we'll move on to item 1, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of March 2024. Is everyone happy with those for accuracy? Public question time. We don't have any public questions. Item 3, to advise of any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent elsewhere on the agenda. We don't have any urgent items. Item 4 is declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Is there any declarations from anybody? No? Okay, we'll move on to review of the panel membership, which is pages 9 to 14. Fiona, you're going to take us through this.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The panel must conduct a review of its membership at its annual meeting or following elections to ensure that it meets the requirements of the balanced objective test set out in the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act 2011. To achieve this, the panel must ensure it represents all parts of the relevant police area, represents the political makeup of the relevant local authorities when taken together, and individual members should have the skills, knowledge and experience necessary for the Police and Crime Panel to discharge its functions effectively. The latest Home Office guidance from 2023 indicates that panels should make significant efforts to seek to implement this balanced appointment objective as far as is practicable, so doing all that it can to achieve it, but accepting that it may not always be possible to achieve it. In fact, it was not possible to exactly meet the requirements during the last municipal year, and historically the panel has always comprised an extra Labour member reflecting the City Council's political control and an extra Conservative member reflecting the political control of the District Councils before the May 2023 elections. The current political balance allocations for a 15-member panel allocate 5 seats to the Conservatives, 3 to Labour, 3 to the Liberal Democrats, 1 to the Green Party and 1 to the Independents. However, the proposed membership of the panel, following appointments at annual meetings of each appointing council, does not at present meet the requirements for political balance. The current appointments set out on page 12 of your agendas are for 5 Conservatives, 5 Labour members and 3 Liberal Democrats, with no Green Party or Independent appointees, when there should be 1 of each. There are also 2 independent co-opted members whose terms of office ends in February 2026. It has become customary for appointing councils to put forward their community safety portfolio holders or their community safety partnership chairs to the panel, which reflect the knowledge, skills and experience criteria. However, it does mean that the political balance criteria are not currently met. Officers have explored whether appointing councils would change their representative to enable the achievement of political balance, but none have agreed to do so. We have consulted the Home Office and our regional police and crime panel network in relation to whether the current panel membership is capable of meeting the balance objective requirements as far as is reasonably practicable, but have yet to receive a response. There is an option to increase the size of the panel by co-opting further elected members, and if members wish to consider this route, you would need to make a specific resolution to do so and agree such co-options unanimously. So the panel is being asked at paragraph 19 of the report to consider whether it feels its current appointed membership meets the balance objective as far as is reasonably practicable, or whether further steps should be taken to try and achieve this, and then to agree amendments to the panel's constitution to reflect the current membership. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Any views from panel? Les?
Thank you, Chair. So I think the table on 8 with the proportionality actually, for me, makes sense. And the 3 larger parties all, lose a proportional representation. And I think in the world that we are, and we do put pressure on the PCC to pursue green agendas and environmental standards across the force, and of course an independent opportunity to have an impartial view of the world. So actually, if it is achievable, my preference would be that proportional representation you have on that table in number 8. So thank you, Chair.
Sarah?
I think the current structure, the difficulty will be many of us as local authorities are now in harmony coalitions with different parties taking up different portfolios. So whilst I sit here as a Labour councillor, I'm part of a coalition and therefore have to represent the views of my independent colleagues. And I think there will be a number of authorities around the table and who are part of the panel that are in similar situations.
Thank you. Liz?
I think as a member of the Cooperative Party, I would like to point out that the Co-op have more local councillors in the area than the Green Party do. So as the only Co-op person, thanks, Les.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that. Obviously, as part of a coalition at Arborough, we have the same situation, and of course, one must also recognise the fact that many of us work full time and that not everybody can make meetings during the day, and I've made special provision to do that myself.
Andrew?
Thanks, Jay. I mean, following on from Sarah's point, I mean, the situation we have is we have an alliance at North West, and I'm not actually the CSP chair. I used to be the CSP chair, but for political balance, I've come onto the panel because of my previous experience. But I don't think any of us are in an ideal situation here. But I just thought I'd note that.
I think it is really difficult, and we did last year. We weren't fully on board, but we had one Labour member, but we did have a Green council, and I think for me that's the sticking point, is that we have many Green councillors across LLR and they're not represented on this panel. So I really would urge all of you to go back to your districts, and with 2 Labour over, I can handle 1 extra Labour, I think is fair, but having 2 extra Labour and no Green councillor, I don't think is really acceptable in the way that we are operating. And I think we should really have a Green councillor represented on this panel. And as Andrew's just pointed out, it's not just about who's the CSP chair, it's about the skill set and their ability to feed into the meetings and take an interest in the meetings and things like that. So that's just as important to me as to what portfolio they might represent at their council. So we will continue along the route we are taking with districts to urge them to reconsider their appointment. But I would hope that 1 Labour councillor would step down and a Green councillor steps up. And I think we would pretty much be there then. But I just feel we're a bit skew with at the minute without any Green representative on here. So that's my viewpoint at the minute. We will continue behind the scenes before the next meeting, doing the work that we have been doing since the May elections to try and get this as balanced as possible. And we'll continue that work. And when we get the advice from the Home Office, we'll probably bring something back to the next meeting following that advice from the Home Office. But in the meantime, if specifically the Labour members would go back to their respective councils and have that discussion about whether they could be replaced by a Green councillor, that would be gratefully received, I think, for all of us. So we'll leave it as it is for now, and then we'll come back at the next meeting with a further update as to where we are. But we do need to clarify, because we've had people turn up today that we weren't expecting, people were expecting, are now not here. So we are a bit late notification from some councils about who their rep is anyway today. So yeah, we do need to sort this out. We will come back in the next meeting.
Could you agree that members, sort of as an interim basis, that the amendments are to reflect the current membership in the interim, please?
I'm happy to put that forward as we are now, but I think it's not the settled position and we won't accept it as the settled position at the moment. There's more work to do, I think. Everyone happy with that approach? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to item 6, serious violence duty. And Grace, are you taking us? So, okay, you say a few words.
Thank you. I'll say a few words by way of introduction, if I may. First of all, is to introduce Grace, of course. For those of you who don't know her, Grace is the head of our Violence Reduction Network, which is the Leicestershire and Rutland version of what is known across most of the country as a Violence Reduction Unit. We wanted, however, to make it a network because we thought that more emphasised the collaborative nature and the partnership approach which we're taking with getting this work done, and Grace has been leading this for how many years then? Almost 5 years, and doing a splendid job, at least in my opinion, and I would hope you would all agree. So first of all, welcome Grace, thank you for coming along today, and I'm sure if you have any detailed questions on this, Grace will be more than happy to answer. If I can start by drawing the panel's attention to paragraph 4 of the report, in which it is the ask of the panel, if you like. First of all, is the panel supportive of the work undertaken by myself and my office to date? And secondly, are there any recommendations that you would want to make to myself or my office? As those of you who have been here before know, it's not really my custom to make long and involved introductions when you've all had a report to read, because the reports tend to include most of what's going on. I would draw your attention to paragraph 6, which outlines the new serious violence duty, which not only is the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner taking on, but also most of the, or a large number rather, of other local bodies and authorities, including the councils that most of you are representing. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. Personally, I'm very pleased with the work that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and the VRN, Violence Reduction Network, have done to date. Paragraph 15 gives you the local definition of what we are categorising as serious violence, and then that is driving the way in which we're dealing with this problem. From page 21 onwards, you've got the detailed slides which are explaining a huge amount of the work that has been undertaken, the work that it is intended to do, and the ways in which it is being done. And I think that really that does underline the real importance of the Violence Reduction Network and the work that it does to the communities that we all represent. And I'm sure we all want to see serious violence driven down across Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And if I may, Chair, I will express a hope that whoever forms the new government after the general election does recognise the massive amount of productive work that violence reduction units and network do, not just here but across the country, and will continue to fund them. I was going to say as they have been in the past, but of course we always want to see more generous funding for something as important as the work that Grace and her team are doing. So that's my remarks by way of introduction. Chair, will see any questions to me or to Grace, we'll both be happy to undertake them.
Do you think you wanted to add, Grace, in the first? Yeah.
So those of you that know me will know that usually when I come to panel, I do talk specifically about the work of the Violence Reduction Network. However, just to highlight, this paper is more specific in terms of it relates to the new serious violence duty. And that came into force back in December 2022, and local areas had a year to mobilise for that duty and achieve the 4 requirements that are outlined on page 17.8. So although I'm more than happy to speak about the Violence Reduction Network, the really important part of this paper is in relation to Mr Matthews' role in terms of supporting the partnership to ensure that it is fully compliant with the duty, the deadline being January just gone. So hopefully it gives the board, the panel rather, a really good overview of how as a partnership we've achieved that. We did use the VRN as a vehicle to make sure we were compliant, because why wouldn't we? There's so many similarities between the legal requirement and the collaboration that is the Violence Reduction Network. But I must say, from a partnership point of view, a vast array of organisations have been involved in making sure that we're fully compliant with those legal duties that duty holders now have. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Any questions, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. I think for the panel's benefit, obviously the funding for this has been sort of ad hoc. Do you think it'd be worth just stating how the funding has been sort of achieved in previous years and where we are at the moment and what our hopes for the future are on it?
Yes, of course. So if I split it out between the Violence Reduction Network and then the Serious Violence Duty, because I think it'll be helpful to understand both. For the first 2 years of the Violence Reduction Network, this was across the country, live, it was year-on-year funding, which obviously came with its challenges because we're tasked with taking a long-term preventative approach to violence. So a year's worth of funding for 2 years was quite challenging. We then entered into a 3-year funding settlement that the Home Office gave us 3 years worth of funding, albeit we still had to apply on an annual basis. We're now in year 3 of that funding. So obviously towards the end of this financial year, depending what happens with the general election, it is a little bit tender hooks in terms of what the future of violence reduction units across the country look like, including ours. The VRN has been really successful in generating other funding as well. So we have a number of interventions and projects where we've been successful in bidding for funding from other sources, and they're all on various timelines, but they all do have an end point, most of them being in 2025 as well. The serious violence duty funding was additional funding that was given to local areas in recognition that the legal requirements, particularly for those areas without violence reduction units, so they got more funding those areas. The requirements just demanded a little bit more, particularly of those relevant and specified authorities. That funding as well comes to an end in March 2025. So it's a very significant date for us. Because we've had the support of Mr. Matthews, we do have a team that currently are on permanent contracts, which has really helped in terms of stabilising things. I work really closely with Siobhan and commissioners across the county to look at sustainability plans for all our interventions. But obviously the environment that we're working in at the moment makes that quite challenging.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Whittle.
Just a question of detail on slide 8, page 28. There's just a figure missing. You mentioned for the profile of serious violence, 62.6% occurred in a dwelling. There's no figure for open spaces. And then you've got hospitality and education settings, very small numbers. I just wondered what the figure was for public open places. You probably know.
Thank you. I don't know off by heart, but if I can confirm that back afterwards, I'll make sure I dig that data out for you.
Yes.
Thank you. Liz?
It's a small point on the presentation of the data and the information. I'm first to admit the slides look beautiful. But some of the text boxes are graphics. The text boxes have been put in a random order and don't comply with the screen reader. Can be a very difficult document to use, and I thought I should feed that back to you.
Councillor Whittle, can you just turn your microphone off, please?
I thought it.
Sorry, I said I didn't use my microphone. Thank you. I will feed that back.
I think some of it's a little bit blurry, isn't it, where it's been copied in, yeah, so it's quite difficult to read on a smaller screen, but I know there's so much detail and stats in there that it's hard to get it in, isn't it? Just a quick question from me on, sorry, I've just moved away from it now, I was going to ask. Just on page 17, paragraph 9, the Home Office success measures for the local area. So how are we planning to record that data? Is it going to be through the VRN or is it through the office?
That's right. It's through, they mirror the violence reduction unit success measures, the difference being, if you recall, the VRN initially focused on public place only violence. We've widened out our definition to include sexual violence and violence occurring within domestic settings as well. But fortunately, through the VRM, we have got access, obviously, to police data, but also the health data we need as well. So we get all the attendance and admission data for anyone in our area who attends any emergency department or hospital for violence-related injuries. Well, I say any in England and Wales.
So we'll have all that in for those success measures, because obviously they've already dropped through your slides, haven't they, that the work that you've done over the last 5 years. We've seen that reduce. And I suppose this is including all ages now, because the VRM was initially under 25s, wasn't it?
That's right. So we've got two sets of performance data we're tracking. We're obviously tracking the VRN's original definition, because that is where we're seeing the reductions, albeit there's still a lot of work to do. Now we've got this new definition from this year. We've got our baseline to be able to track against that new definition as well. So we do track both, because obviously a lot of what we do is long term. So we need to be able to track it over time rather than just year on year.
I suppose this is probably a question for Mr. Matthews. If the funding doesn't come through for the VRN or the serious violence, I mean, where does that leave us within LLR? Have we still got some schemes that we can still support with whatever funding that we've got, or are we just hanging off a cliff?
Given that we're almost certainly looking at, well, we are looking at new government with the new parliament. At the moment, we really don't know. I mean, the manifestos for each of the parties have been published, so we're studying them. But as you will know, Chair, once a new government gets in place, some of the provisions are introduced quickly, some are put back for a couple of years before they come in. I'd love to be able to answer your question. As Grace says, we've got full-time contracts for the staff now. That follows on from a previous arrangement whereby we put aside in the OPCC, we put aside a sum of money to underwrite the VRN for 1 year after they, so that there was a little bit of continuity. We've now got permanent contracts. Quite what's likely to happen after the election, I'm afraid I really can't tell you. We're going to have to wait and see. As I say, I will express the hope that the excellent work being done by the Violence Reduction Network and units is recognised, but we are in the hands of our masters, I'm afraid.
Okay, so watch this space, but I presume you will continue to lobby the new government on this issue, because I think it is really important. There's been some fantastic work, and to see that go down the gutter would be absolutely soul destroying. I'm sure Grace would feel that immensely if it all went to pot. But so those staff are within your budget, are they? Within your budget line now? So no matter what happens to the government funding, those staff will remain. That's already written in with your budget.
For this year, yes. For future years, of course, we're dependent on the budget given to us by the government. And of course, if that increases, then we will look for ways to use that most productively for the people of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. If the central government decides to cut funding, then we'll have to look at ways to minimise the damage. But insofar as any job is permanent in the current circumstances, the answer is yes.
Thank you. Les.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Grace. See you again. I'm just curious. I'm guessing I thought I picked it up out of this report, but I can't re-find it again. Do we take an assessment and look at the interconnectivity, and it may be within the stalking and harassment area, of what is ultimately happening in the world of social media? Because it is getting nasty, it is getting toxic, there's a lot of hate out there. We see time and time again radicalisation through social media. So what kind of interest or look or analysis do we take in how that interacts with the other areas of serious violence? Thank you.
So as you'd expect, we picked up on that as part of our co-production for the new strategy. So there's a line within the strategy that looks specifically around social media, the dynamic with violence, vulnerability, and everything that kind of comes with that. We're really fortunate in the Violence Reduction Network. We get 2 strands of funding through the Youth Endowment Fund, which means that we're able to work really closely with them. They are currently looking at that area now, because as you can imagine, it's quite complex in terms of cause and effect. But that is something that we feel well plugged into. We are taking quite a considered approach to it, so that whatever we do, as you'd expect, is evidence-based. We've got a high confidence that it will have the impact that we'd like to have it.
I actually attended the Youth Endowment Fund conference in Birmingham early this year. It's really, really good, the work that they're doing there and the violence. So yeah, really interesting. Salma.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the incidents during the summer 2022, the riots, the public order offences, have those stats been absorbed into these statistics? Because I was quite surprised not to see a spike in those months. And I know that they're being investigated separately, but if you could just provide some clarification, thank you.
So in short, if a offence was recorded by the police that falls within our definition, it will be included within our data. If it's an offence that isn't within our definition, then it's not included. So you wouldn't necessarily see a kind of parallel increase. It just depends what's in and what isn't. I could ask our analyst to do some analysis on that, if that would be helpful to panel.
There was lots of crime, wasn't there, with disorder, but whether it would be classed as serious violence, I think is the issue, isn't it? As whether you'd see a spike, the same as we get spike in domestic abuse at this particular time when football's on. You know, you can see those trends, but is that definition? Is it? How much work would it be to get that separate data?
If I don't promise and just say that I'll go away and ask, just because I imagine if Beth is watching this now, she's be cursing me. I guess what is important with that is, I mean, as a violence reduction network, we pretty much view violence as violence, no matter where it happens. It's very difficult to separate it out. The causes, the risk factors are all very similar, regardless of how it manifests itself. And because we prioritise young people around that time, we just made sure that all our interventions and projects got that little bit closer to young people, just to reassure and try and prevent them from getting pulled into things which they shouldn't be getting pulled into. So even if it doesn't, you know, strictly speaking, come under our definition, we'll still make sure that we've got a response that helps.
If you have a look and see, but obviously we don't want hours and hours of you trawling through data, but yeah, if it's fairly easy to separate that out, it would be good to know. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's really extensive. Just one or two questions really. In terms of Leicester City, I can see, according to we're quite high up on the agenda, and obviously with increasing demand and limited resources, is how do we overcome that? Because you know the violence issue is always going to remain, and how do we address that? The other issues, the riots, I was there present, not participating, but observing. Make that quite clear. and in terms of the engagement, is quite specific, that particular, the disturbances between different communities, but the profile was kind of in that particular age group that we mentioned. And it's something that we need to focus on how we've addressed it, because I know that the justice involvement, the justice process has been ongoing. It's been ongoing. I think it's been dealt with now, but it'd be quite interesting what the impact was on that. And thirdly, in terms of what you'd mentioned earlier about the social media, every so often I get forwarded WhatsApp messages with schools and people. I mean, schools have very limited control of what individuals are doing, but what can be done? Because you can see horrendous videos of people being attacked and whatever, and the use of social media, because that is serious violence that's been from peer to peer, and whether that can be controlled in any way. Because I was hearing on something on the Radio 4 something to limit young people accessing social media until the age of 16 or 17. But these are the things that we have to deal with. So thanks, Chair.
Well, I can't pretend to have all the answers to those questions, but just in terms of the first one around Leicester City, and you've picked up on the fact that it does disproportionately is impacted by serious violence. I guess the whole ethos of the Violence Reduction Network, but also this new serious violence duty, is that public health approach. So from a kind of, so we can have a universal offer that will go into every corner of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, but when it comes to our targeted offer, it should go to the places, the communities that are most affected by violence. So when you look at our investment in different interventions, there's a disproportionate investment, if you looked at it just on paper, in the city. But that's absolutely the right thing to do, because it's children and young people in those places that are more likely to be involved in violence as either perpetrators, victims, or both. We have got interventions elsewhere as well. And of course, our universal offer is no matter where you live in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. But I mention that because when resources are finite, that's one way that we can make the best use of resources. The other way is to make sure that whatever we do is evidence-based, and we make sure that we design things in a way where we have the most confidence possible that they will have the impact that we're looking for. And then, of course, we evaluate things as well. And 5 years on, we're starting to get that data now and see the impact that interventions are having. Sometimes we find that it isn't the impact we want, and then we disinvest. But, you know, more often than not, it's the kind of impact that we want to see. So I think that approach, that's probably what's different about the Violence Reduction Network to perhaps how things have been done before. We're very, very comfortable with targeting resource where children and young people are most likely to be affected. With the second question about the criminal justice system, I'm not sure I got the question in its entirety. But I think because the way the criminal justice system works, what I would say is that there's always opportunities regardless of the process. So a lot of the work that our interventions did around that time were in the here and now, or, you know, in the immediate aftermath. So we wouldn't wait for a whole criminal justice system to finish if we've got those reachable moments where we're able to intervene earlier. I'm not sure that answered your question.
Just a bit about you were talking about violence in schools, weren't you? Because I get sent videos from people about things that are happening in schools. And it might be worth just sending to you and to send out to all panel members about the things that with the work that we do in schools, and whether those schools that you're getting that information about can sign up to our bystanders projects and stuff like that. So it might be good just to send that to you, and just as a reminder for new panel members as well. Did you want to come back?
Chair, what I was talking about is the criminal justice system in terms of the spike, because the people that were actually perpetrating the crime of the disturbance fell into that particular age group that we're looking at, and that was because I understand now the sentencing process come to an end, and there should be some kind of conclusion. Maybe it's an operational issue for the police, I'm not sure. They will have some of that information.
Thank you.
So recently, obviously, there's been a number of high-profile cases in Crown Court around the murder case. There was a lot of joint enterprise. Obviously, 8 young people convicted. I believe 1 was convicted of murder and the rest for manslaughter. Is there work that the Violence Reduction Network are doing around joint enterprises, awareness amongst young people so that they understand what this is?
Sorry, absolutely devastating. There's all sorts of work that's happening, and when a serious incident happens like that, so tragic, and the entire team in the Violence Reduction Network really feel it, because it feels like there's never enough that we can be doing to try and prevent children and young people falling into serious violence. However, in answer to your question, all of our interventions would always look at the group dynamic. Obviously, we know that associating with other peers who are involved in violence is a risk factor. So we would never treat someone just individually in an isolated way. It would be looking at who else they're involved in, who their kind of more pro-social peers might be, how we can increase activity that might draw them away from those associations which aren't as healthy.
Okay. Having been the chairman of the youth panel, Leicester Magistrates, for many years, and dealt with children in court from the age of 10 upwards for 20 odd years, what sort of liaison do you actually have with youth magistrates on the reduction of crime? Because obviously I've seen it all from murder down to non-school attendance, let's put it that way.
So youth justice teams, or youth offending teams as they used to be known, are part of the Violence Reduction Network. So we do liaison through them basically with youth court magistrates. We probably could do more in terms of some of the feedback as well, because we have stories of the other side when people have done well, etc. But also some of the things that our workers within our interventions see as well on a day-to-day basis, and obviously what magistrates see as well from their perspective. So could probably do more, but we are well plugged in through Youth Justice.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the end of questions. Really good discussion. Anything you want to add to Ms Matthews' name? Okay, thank you, Grace. Thank you, Siobhan, for coming. Okay, we'll move on to item 7, so the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner update. Mr Matthews.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose the first thing to draw the panel's attention to is that there was some curtailment of activity here in the run-up to the election for Police and Crime Commissioner, because the standard pre-election purdah rules kicked in, and that had an impact on what was going on. I'll draw your attention, if I may, to paragraph 3, which is, as we usually do, is what we are requesting the panel to think about in the way that they look at this report. On page 69, it might help if I was to let the panel know that the red dots that you're looking at are the places where I went on a community day. Obviously, as Police and Crime Commissioner and Rani as Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, we both undertake other visits as well, but these are the formalised, if you like, community interaction that goes on. And on that map, those are the red dots. The report, which of course I'm sure you've all read, is as usual split into the various categories that's normal for this. So we've got community engagement, due diligence, commissioning and partnership, scrutiny and government, and so on. Under scrutiny and governance, I think you'll find is a reference to the visit that panel members undertook to Force Headquarters to have various bits and pieces explained to you, and I hope that you all found that useful. It's always unfair to pick things out, and a huge amount of work goes on in the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner that doesn't even make it into this report, because otherwise you'd be looking at about a 50 or 60 page report. So it's always unfair to pick things out. But if I may, paragraph 26, where we're talking about the safer streets activity, I think is worthy of comment, and I have already passed on my congratulations to staff involved in that. The people zones, of course, we've had a very traumatic experience take place in one of the people zones. And again, I've just put on record my thanks to the staff in my office and everyone in the people zone who stepped in and helped to cope with a really difficult situation there, but also, of course, the work in the people zones more generally. I would normally at this point talk about the custody visitors, but there's another item on the agenda later on where we'll be looking at that in more detail. So, as usual, this is a bit of an update on what the office has been doing, but as I say, I ask you to take into account the fact that some of our activity was curtailed because of the Police and Crime Commissioner elections that took place at the beginning of May. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members? Please. Councillor Joanna, you can switch your mic on. That's great.
The uptake of the parish councils seemed to be rather disappointing. What do you attribute that to?
Okay, I think partly this was to do with the times of the meetings and so on. We had quite a lot of written representations that came in. And certainly both myself and Rani are invited to a lot of parish council meetings, when we attend as many as we can, but I forget how many parish councils there are. It's over 200, I think, across LNR as a whole. So obviously we can't get around to all of them, but I do spend, if you follow me on social media, you see I've spent quite a lot of time at parish councils. So I think partly it was to do with the time of the meetings, but we've drawn a number of lessons, which I think going forwards with our parish council engagement, we're going to be looking to try and refine this and make it better, because, and I suppose I'm talking to parish council myself, should I have declared that as an interest? I'm not entirely certain.
We'll note it.
Parish councils do know their area. They know the problem is in the area very well. Very often they've got good ideas about how to solve those problems, which can vary in how practical they are. So we are looking to reinforce our engagement with parish councils, and we are going to be learning lessons as we go along. As with any project, if you don't learn as you go along, then you're wasting your time.
Yes.
Thanks, Chair. So you're very welcome at my parish councils, Mr. Matthews. Paragraphs, where are we? So 14 to 22, which are basically your summations of your visits to parish councils. There's very clearly a couple of common themes in there, one of which is road safety, speeding, e-scooters, and. So I guess the question is, you gather all this intelligence and local concerns. You are responsible for holding the force to account and scrutinising their performance. These things don't seem to be going away, and therefore, I guess my question is, as the office of the PCC, what kind of leverage and pressure can you put on the chief to actually pick up these local concerns? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I must be saying it's not always the chief who is the responsible person. I mean, quite a lot of the comments that I get are about weight restrictions, and some of those are actually to do with weight, and there's a bridge which are relating. Some of it's more to do with the width of a road or a sharp corner, and so on. I'm afraid that's actually the county council responsibility, and so we pass. So I'm not always putting pressure on the chief constable. There's also other bodies that are involved in this, and this is why partnership working is so important. It can be a matter of getting different partners involved in trying to do things. When it comes to putting pressure on the chief constable, we touched earlier during the hearing on the deputy police and crime commissioner about the operational independence and the independence and so on. There is no clearly defined rules on this in the Act of Parliament that set up the police and crime commissioners. And again, sometimes this is a matter of partnership, sometimes it will be a matter that I, as police and crime commissioner, will commission the chief constable to do a particular thing. And other times there's the general grant that goes to the chief constable, and then he has operational independence within that on how to do things. So it's a mix. Lizzie, who is here, of course, is in charge of our monitoring of police activity, and we always look for the outliers and this and the other. It's a partnership. I think I don't want anyone here to go away with the impression that I walk into the chief constable's office, get him in an arm lock and tell him he's got to do something. That's not how it works. It's a matter of holding to account. It's a matter of funding particular services. It's a matter of discussions. And very often, given that all of us are working within the restraints of public sector spending, it's a matter of juggling priorities. And sometimes it is going to be a matter of trying to get central government to play ball. You mentioned about e-scooters. I think it's been a common theme. If the law could be clarified and the penalties could be made clearer and the enforcement easier, then we'd be able to deal with those a lot more easily.
Come back, Chair, because I'm going to disagree with you in some parts, Mr. Matthews, because the only bit of highway enforcement that is responsibility of the county is people parking under yellow lines. Pavement obstruction, physical obstruction of the highway, speeding, weight restrictions are all the police authority. They really are. So that's my point. And indeed, it's only the police authority who can issue section 59 for e-scooters and a few other bits and bobs. So I'm going to disagree with in some of the principles. My query is, you gather all this information, what do we do with it? Because these are all recurring themes. I'm sure any of the members and parish councillors and anybody else around the table, these are constantly in our inboxes. And I'd like to be able to say it gets better, but actually it doesn't. And I know in a different world, I can't comment too much because that world is confidential. Road safety is one of the themes that is being picked up, because something's not right at the moment. So I'm just curious. We gather all this intelligence, we gather all this localized feedback. what do we do with it, and what do we as members and representatives of the communities hope to see from it? And I accept you're the PCC, you're not operational, but a lot of the resource or the resolution of this is operational, and your role is to hold the force to account, whether it's the chief or traffic officer, superintendent, whatever it is. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think if you speak to the trading standards people, you'll find there is some sort of a role with weight restrictions on that one. Perhaps we can take this up outside the meeting. I'm convinced there is a trading standards role in this. As regards speeding and so on, I mean, part of the role in this is to target where the speed cameras go. And if I pick up when I'm either visiting a part of the city, I think the most recent one where I picked this up was a road in Oadby, where people were complaining about speeding, or it's a parish council or whatever. If there is a location on that road where it is sensible to put a speed, either the speed van or an officer with a speed gun, that can be deployed quite quickly to do a spot check to see if the data that is obtained from the speed gun matches the perception of people. And as I'm sure you'll be aware, sometimes what is perceived to be a dangerous speed is a dangerous speed because it's school chucking out time and there are lots of children about, but actually it's not actually breaking the speed limit on the road. And so various things. But what happens is, yes, we can get speed guns deployed to see if there is really a problem. If that data shows there is a problem, then it all gets put onto the list and additional enforcement will take place in the road and so on. But I think looking to the forwards, the road safety partnership, I think is something that all of us need to have a look at, because far more people are killed on the roads of Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland than are murdered in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. And so if you're looking at public safety in its wider sense, I would agree with you, that is something we really need to have a good close look at, given whatever the funding situation is when we get round to the funding round with the new government. And to think, right, okay, road safety in the general sense, when that comes down to personal safety, injuries and deaths, are we all making the right balance there? That's something we're going to have to come back to. You're absolutely right.
I'll just follow that up a little bit more. You will have had in your inbox emails from some parish councils in Rutland on the auto speed watch, which they are getting very excited about, and will undoubtedly start emailing other parish councils within the county because they think Rutland isn't obviously big enough. For those that don't know, this is a system which can collect data on the average speed of vehicles between the two cameras. The parish councils are offering to buy the quick kit, to download the data and then send the data into the force. They're funding the fitting of it and the upgrading of it and the insuring of it. And Leicestershire is one police authority that is refusing to engage with it. There are other police authorities that are. This would seem to me to be a technological response which might actually appear to support. One of the important things about it is it gives hotspot data. So, for example, one of our villages, we know the speeding happens at about 7 in the morning. The chance of getting a camera van out there is pretty slim. And I think this is a way we need to look at things differently. I think I need to flag up these 7 parishes are getting very irate at getting nowhere, and they are going to start spreading the message.
If I may, Chair, you wouldn't expect me to give a firm commitment at this point, but I can assure the councillor that I suppose the phrase is under active review as we speak. And while I can't give a commitment at this point, we are re-looking at the whole situation. Okay.
I'm intrigued now, so should we go in and looking at that later? But I think you just pick up on that point is that it's been my day for discussing AI apparently today. So I think technology will move on, and stuff like speeding and stuff like that is one of those things that you just think can be done by AI, and yeah, so we need to probably be looking into the future. So yeah, I've watched that with interest. Just a couple of points from me. The visit to Force HQ was really good as always, so really enjoyed that. So we're working with Claire going forward now, looking at a plan for a panel to come out. I hope that more panel members do come out, because it's great to actually see what we're funding and what we're agreeing and looking at here actually happening on the front line. So I hope that more members will come out and do that. But I take Councillor Knight's point that people are working and stuff. But if you can get there, it's really useful. Just a quick question from me on paragraph 34 on the community payback projects. You've got like the total of hours there, 1,717, and 5 completed ongoing projects and 9 coming forward in the people zones. It would be good to know what sort of projects those are in doing and how that helps with the wider police and crime plan. What impact is that having on your plan when people are doing community payback?
Okay, well, certainly at New Parks and Bell Foundry, there's been some really impressive landscaping going on, but Siobhan might be able to add a little bit of detail there.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's been some work around landscaping, particularly around the New Parks Hub where the young people are, and then there's been some areas in Bell Foundry where there's been traditional drug dealing spots, and they've been kind of like hidden because there's been overhanging trees and things like that. So it's worked like that as well. It's kind of made those areas a little bit more accessible and cut off drug dealing spots.
So you can see a real impact on your policing pipeline from that. Okay, so if that can come back with a little bit more detail whenever your next report comes out, would be great. Liz.
Just quickly on paragraph 31, I was wondering if you could give some more information on what the Fearless campaign was, what platforms it went out on, and are you sure all those young people were within Leicestershire? Rutland.
I'll let you do that.
So in terms of, yeah, it is the impact, because it's impressions, so it's like multiple impressions. So you may have a certain number of young people, but it's viewed multiple times. So that does look like a lot, doesn't it, and everything. But like it says there, 13,000 young people swiped up to find out more about the campaign, and it's looking about how we can some of the stuff that comes out of the people zones, how we can extrapolate that out across Leicester, Leicestershire, and Rutland.
Sorry, I was just wondering what the Fearless was actually highlighting.
So that it's Fearless is working around sort of like upstanding programs and things like that for young people, feeling safer, and young people feeling safer in their communities.
Any other questions or comments on this?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking at the report. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's some reasonable explanation to it, but the kind of the outreach stuff, it's mainly county based. I'm just wondering whether the areas mentioned, why city doesn't mentioned as it should be. I'm not sure. Maybe there's some kind of information, some kind of explanation for that. And also in terms of the people zones network meetings, how are they determined, and how is that done? How do we outreach that project?
All right, thank you. As far as the community days is concerned, we've divided the whole Force area up into a number of areas, sort of roughly based on population, and so I'm moved around them regularly so that it's split. So it's done in terms of population. So I do get to the city as in proportion to its population as elsewhere. So I say this is imperfect, but if you perhaps look over a year's worth, you'll see that that's happening roughly in terms with population. Other outreach work that myself and Rani undertake is partly driven by where crime is, where there is antisocial behaviour, but also, of course, partly driven by where we're invited to go. I can't just walk into a meeting of the neighbourhood watch in Ibstock if I haven't been invited to go there. So it varies, but certainly the staff within the OPCC keep very close tabs on where we're both going, and if there's an obvious gap, we will be looking to fill that by not inviting ourselves, but you know what I mean. You invite people and ask, would you like the Police and Crime Commissioner to come and see things? As returns the people zones, again, I'm going to hand over to Siobhan. But part of the idea with people zones is that, you know, we're empowering them to do things for themselves. So it's not always entirely within our control. It is very much about capacity building and empowering local communities. But again, Siobhan has got more of a grip on the detail.
So if you look at our sort of like 3 people zones, you can see that there's like in terms of how that works, there's definite levels of how long they've been in place, what that sort of like has looked like and the support that I have. So if we take, for example, the new parks, which is the longest one and that's the most input, and is really showing that kind of like now we're able to take a little bit of a step back, and that's run more by the community. So with that brings sort of like a bit of a double edge, because it's much more community focused and we have a little bit less of a steer on that, but eventually that's what we want to do, is we want to get the community to the point where we pull out and we go into another community. What was the rest of the question? Was that it? Oh.
Yeah, I just wondering how we decided what particular areas to go into, and you've answered that question.
So yeah, and there were problem profiles done in the original part of the in the original part of the escalation. There was separate problem profiles done. There was certain criteria. One of those was that they needed to be a certain community focus already, so that it was too difficult to go in and run everything that would be. Sorry, someone's ringing me. To be able to run everything, so there was certain setup criteria, and it was based on the crime that was happening there, and then also the perceptions of the people within those zones.
Chair, just echoing what you said, it would be good to see that in the report, more details on actually what impact is happening, what was raised by the community and what community paid back. I feel like it's a little bit too vague within the report, so that's what I'd want to see.
Yeah, I think we've sort of said before, I see a little bit of it in there, but a little bit more of, I've done this. What's the impact? What's happened to that by that work that you've done? So yeah, I can see a start of it in this. There's a lot more than there was before. So just a bit more of, you've done that, great, but what's the impact for the community and on your police and crime pan? Okay, anything else on this? No? Okay, we'll move on to item 8, the corporate governance report, pages 77. Are you introducing Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I think previously I've referred to this as a new format, but I think it's now becoming an established format, but it's not yet an old format. So I would hope that most people are accustomed to how this is working. And of course, the pages 81 to 95 contains all the detail on this. I mean, you have just said, you know, what's coming out of this, and I think that the paragraphs 11 going through to the end of the report really do capture some of this. So the core performance, this was something that was raised as a concern. We've worked with the force. The force have looked at how to work this out. My office provided additional funding in the short term to try and get this sorted out. And now the figures have shown a marked improvement. The same with, as set out in paragraph 13, pardon me, the performance on rape cases was a concern. Again, you know, the Chief Constable has really gone out of his way to get things sorted here. There's been a marked improvement. We want to see more improvement. I'll be working with the Chief Constable on that. But as I say, this is now an established format. I'm hoping I don't have to explain it all to everybody, other than to say, for those that are new here, the Corporate Governance Board is, if you like, the formal way in which I hold the Chief Constable to account for the performance of the Leicestershire Police. They're held on a regular basis. Largely it's triggered by data sets that are brought forward by Lizzie. If something's looking a little bit out of kilter, if there's a spike in something, or we're out of kilter with the national averages, reports are brought to the Corporate Governance Board. We discuss them in sometimes in a great amount of detail, and they really can go on when we're digging into something. And then the Chief Constable will take actions back from that, and sometimes have to report back again, either to the next board or the one after, or, you know, on how effective those measures have been, what improvement has come forward. And this is a format So I say in which I formally hold the Chief Constable to account, and then it always forms a large part of reports coming here, so that you can scrutinise the ways in which we're holding the Chief Constable to account. But as always, Chair, happy to deal with any questions.
Just one from me first before I ask members. Just under point 4, under the finance of the savings, starting on page 89, just at point 3, the Chief Constable's requesting use of reserves to transition of the workforce to support the glide path. Just wondered if you could explain really what that means, please.
Okay. As you may or may not know, our Chief Constable holds a private pilot's licence, and sometimes his language can be peppered with aviation references and so on. A glide path in this, what he's meaning here, is how you get from A to B in the smoothest, trouble-free way possible. So you're just sort of gently gliding to where you're trying to get to. In terms of the use of reserves, that is something we're approaching on a case-by-case basis. So I have just recently authorised the use of some reserves to deal with, what's the great phrase for this? Thank you, redundancy and redeployment. Didn't want to get that wrong. But given, again, you know, and I know this is being a theme of this meeting, given we're not quite sure what's going to happen with funding in the not too distant future, I'm being very reticent to allow anything to come out of reserves. We're not over-endowed with reserves at the moment. But when the Chief Constable makes a persuasive case, then I will authorise reserves, because undoubtedly we need to make these savings. The trajectory appears to be for police forces across the whole country to become smaller, unfortunately, but that may change, of course, we will see. But that's what that is talking about, that little phrase there.
Thank you. And I suppose I would want to see something as well about AI. This is my hot topic today, about, great topic. I suppose some work there with the force about what they're doing about obviously reducing, you know, we know we've all struggling with finances. If there's something we can do to make things a lot easier for residents through using AI and automation, then we should be looking at, for I hope you having those conversations with the Chief Constable as well. If not, maybe that should be something we can look into further. Any questions on this, Les?
Thanks, Chair. With your indulgence, and indeed Mr. Matthews' indulgence, I've been a bit cheeky and a bit opportunistic. So bullet point 12, you're talking about the call performance and the abandonment rate. One of the queries I posted last time, which is in the minutes, but I don't think I've seen the answer to, is what was the website abandonment rate for reporting issues? Have we got that data yet?
Thank you, Chair. I think the easy answer to this one is it's very difficult to tell. And part of this, no, stick with me on this, is anecdotally, let's put it that way to start with. What quite often happens is somebody's phoning 101 at the same time as they're online, and then whichever one they get to first, they abandon the other one, if you're with me. Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair. But also with 101, they'll phone 101, and if they haven't had an answer within 3 or 4 minutes, it'll be, oh, click, and then go online. So, so it's not as straightforward as it might seem. They are working on it. We have got a report due to come to me, and I'll be very happy, Chair, to pass the results on to you as soon as we've got the figures. But it would appear it's not as straightforward as either you or I thought it was going to be. Lizzie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, just to follow on from what the British is saying, that is going to take a longer time to get through. But what they have agreed to is that when they track the confidence and satisfaction figures from first initial contact with the police, they're now going to start chunking that up for us in terms of how they've contacted the police, which we haven't previously had, which is an easier thing to do. So we'll get that data a lot sooner. So if they've contacted via email compared to phone, we'll get the different split in terms of how satisfied those members of the public are.
I like the sound of all of that, but actually providing the information of what page the website was abandoned is very simple. to establish. And that was the core question. Where in that process are they abandoning the web page? Because it comes back to, and it is in the minutes, the stuff you're being asked to declare, the diversity and inclusivity is not what you have to answer when you'd call 101 or the twos. So there's a fundamental, now I do remember Mr. Matthews saying it may be a sort of national standard that we have to do, but actually, if the name of the game is to get the reports to the force in the smoothest, quickest possible time, and we've got a high abandonment rate on certain pages on the website, there's something wrong, is all I would say. But we'll wait for the report. Thank you, Chair.
We need a nice glide path through the reporting on the website, please, if you could feed that back. Thank you. Yeah, no, I've definitely done that where I've been on the phone. This is taking hours. I'll go on the website, and whichever one happens first, I'll abandon it. So I know that does happen because I've done it. But I take your point as if you get to a diversity question or where you live, and I just want to report a crime, not do all this. Yeah, so I do think we need to look into this further.
Lizzie will know I'm very happy to sit in Lizzie's office and compare the two bits of data and draw some conclusions.
We'll work on that. Any other questions from anybody on this? No. Okay, on to item 9, Operation Satira and Rape Performance, pages 97 to 104.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm right in saying this was requested by the panel, wasn't it? Yes, okay. So
I think it was requested by Councillor Russell, if he's not here. I think was my recollection. So, but she hasn't fed any questions in.
Oh, okay, all right. I think this is I don't know if it's a standing item at Corporate Governance Board. It's certainly a regular item. It comes every 6 months to Corporate Governance Board, and I think that's what triggered this, because there was a thing in the Corporate Governance Board report, and then more detail was requested. So here is the more detail. So, of course, there is what the force does about rape cases and how they are handled and how the force goes about trying to prevent things. And then, of course, there's a whole lot about what the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner does to support victims to try and drive down the cases, these awful, some of which are absolutely awful, that we see here. Some of it we do through commissioning, some of it we do with partners. So I'm sorry Councillor Russell isn't here, because I'm sure she would have had a number of questions. There may well be other members that have questions. However, on a very personal level, if I can crave your indulgence, Chair, on page 101, you will see funding is being given to Living Without Abuse, which do some very important work. I've been persuaded to join the Living Without Abuse Strictly Superstars dance competition. Councillor Phillimore has clearly seen me dance on some occasion or other. I will be seeking sponsorship, and tickets are available to the grand finale, at which you will all be able to turn up and see my dance moves. But if anyone wants to sponsor me, it's all for a very good cause. Details will be available shortly. So haven't got that out of the way. This is a really important area of work, both that the police do and that the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner commissions work, and so on. I think if Councillor Russell was the movement behind this and she's not here, I don't know what if she wants to come to us individually with specific questions, we'd be very happy to entertain that, because I know it is a matter of importance to her. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions from anybody on this paper, Liz?
It's only an observation, Chair. I think, between the OPC and the force, the further we can get down this route, the better, because there was a report out, was it last week? There's still the failure of rape cases to actually get into court is 80, 90 something %. It's absolutely crazy. So, carry on, do it, go for it, and let me know about your sponsorship.
I think CPS don't help with some of this work as well, don't it? It's not easy for victims, and sometimes the delay in cases coming to court is really, really hard for victims. So I I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done around this, but especially with the CPS as well. It's not helpful. Krishna.
It's more of a comment just to say those that have gone to court, though, there are comprehensive aim assessments being completed to determine the decisions on what the outcome should be for the outcome of conviction, really. And I know several judges are asking for very detailed aim assessments to be completed on perpetrators to make sure that the victim does get some form of feeling of justice being completed. And I think that's what we need to be pushing for, is making sure that there is kind of justice within the system as well.
I think that's what victims feel, don't they? Wait all that time to get to court and then they don't feel they get justice anyway.
Yeah,
so
even though that the period to get to court is still very prolonged, and obviously being so complex, by doing the aim assessment and having that extension for the courts to make that decision is improving.
Any questions, Liz?
As a follow-up to Leslie's question, really, on paragraph 7 and paragraph 9. So we've got nationally the force sits 29th out of 43 forces for volume. I assume that means that we have more cases of rape than most forces, or less cases of rape? More cases. Okay. So if we come down to paragraph 9, then we're currently at 6%, which I appreciate is only 1% below the national average, but 32nd for the volume of positive outcomes. It disappointing.
Yeah, if I may, because I think just on Liz's point, I think some of this is the outcome of the investment and the time and the focus that the force put in to making reporting easier. So we would naturally see a spike. So.
Also, if I may, Chair, the rate of positive outcomes is improving. So we are still below the national average, but we're better than we were not so very long ago.
Can I just clarify something in response to that? Because this is about reported rape offences, not rape offences, is it? So to say that we have more rapes in this area than anywhere else is not strictly true. It's the reporting is the issue, isn't it? So I just want to clarify what was just said in answer to Liz. This doesn't show that we have more rapes in this area than anywhere else in the country. It shows that we have more reported rapes. So I just want to clarify that point. Am I correct or am I wrong? Okay, so just to clarify that point, because it was quite a little bit misleading, I think, that response there. Has anyone else got any? Oh, sorry, Sarah.
It was just to come back to that point 9, where we say the 6%, obviously that drop-off rate can be for a number of different reasons. And did the force give you that feedback as to whether victims are withdrawing, at what point they're withdrawing? Because that might give an indication to the panel and obviously yourselves as to where we challenge the force or push the force in terms of how they go forward. Because if it is court, then it's CPS should be our focus. If it's just lack of evidence, then that's a police issue. If it's they engage for a period of time but then drop out, is it a lack of victim support? That'd be my question.
So sorry, I suppose just to come in and say that this, when Mr. Matthews kind of alluded earlier that there are certain items that come to corporate governance boards that a lot of time is spent on. This was one of those discussions at the last board, and I suppose just to give a bit more detail on some of those. So in paragraph 9, where you've kind of rightly said, you know, we're 1% below the national average. I suppose it's to give some context there. And what we've not done here is given you where all of the other forces sit and what their percentages are. But I wouldn't want anybody to leave the room and think, you know, there are some forces that are up there at 88% and we're down at 8%. The spectrum and the reason that it can be so hard to move this needle is the spectrum of where forces are in that percentage. It is really quite small. So nationally, kind of the bottom end of that scale will be kind of 5%, and the top end of that for scale will be around 10%. No one's
achieving it above and beyond. That's not to say that actually we want to get this as high as we possibly can. The kind of things that you were asking about, Councillor Cox, in terms of where was that dropout in terms of the victim, where could we do more? And in fact, one of the conversations, you'll remember, Mr. Matthews, that we had quite an in-depth discussion on is the location of where the offences are, so that the office can perhaps support more about prevention and some of that, like Siobhan was talking about earlier, in terms of landscaping to cut down on kind of the drug dealing sites. It's the same kind of thing that we could do around sexual assaults and rape. So I think if Mr. Matthews is content, because we've asked for this to come back to Corporate Governance Board every 6 months, it is something that we could bring back to panel and do every 6 months also.
That's it. Having had a working relationship with places like Juniper Lodge in the past, phenomenal facility, quite a distance if you live in Melton or if you live in Rutland, and just some more detail about how victims progress and their support for the process progresses, because it can be quite frightening for them. Would be good.
Even further for our young people, to be honest. So I'm still campaigning for a suitable accommodation here for our young people that have been a victim of sexual assault. So they have to go to Nottingham still, isn't it?
Yeah, Nottingham or Northants, depending where they live. In relation to sort of like geographical location, one of the things is that we're just putting into place at the moment a pilot whereby if you don't go to Juniper Lodge, then there's a certain amount of support that's not available to you because there needs to be needs assessments and risk assessments done. So we're just putting into place a pilot for the next 12 months that will mean that it doesn't matter 24 hours a day, wherever you are, when an officer attends for a rape, that you will be able to get through to a crisis worker at the SARC. So a lot of that information about what you might need to do, what your next steps are and everything like that will still be available to everybody that's a victim of rape that wants to take that offer up, rather than it having to be you physically have to get to a certain place.
A bit more technology. I'm on it to
do the Good Sam app.
Yeah, that's really good. And just a bit of caveat, just to pick up on those percentages as well. Percentage can be really dangerous in a report because you read so much into it, and without the actual numbers and comparison to other places, it's really dangerous just to take a percentage and run with it. So just a bit of a caveat for those percentages in there as well. Any other questions on this from anyone else? But no, I think we should keep this on the agenda here when you've been to corporate governance. We can have it back again. Obviously, if there's any questions coming in afterwards, we can send them directly into you. Okay, on to item 10, the annual report for the Independent Custody Visitors Scheme, starting on page 105.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm really pleased with the way in which the Independent Custody Volunteer Visitors Scheme is going. I'm actually delighted to be able to report to this panel. We've won 2 national awards, which is really good news and a testament to the hard work that the volunteers are doing on our behalf. Of course, the whole point of the entire scheme is to give the public the reassurance that people who end up in custody are being treated fairly and properly. Some of the people who end up in custody, of course, can be quite violent. Others are in a very vulnerable state themselves, and it is important that they are properly cared for and treated, and this is the scheme that really provides that reassurance. I'm delighted to be able to say we've got 15 new volunteers that are coming online. I will say that it is a constant struggle to get younger people, not because they don't come forwards, but because very often the young people who come forwards are students at one of our 3 universities, and they'll act as volunteers, are very effective volunteers for maybe 18 months or 2 years, and then of course their careers take them elsewhere. But I don't want anyone to think that we're not really trying. We do, and we succeed, and the young people are very good. It's just that we tend not to hang on to them because they're students and then move away. We've also instituted some internal awards for long service, which I was delighted to present some of those just a couple of weeks ago. In paragraphs 26 and 27, if I can bring them to your attention, details the sheer amount of work that our volunteers have been doing recently, and I want to publicly pay tribute to the amount of work that they do. And while it is not the bulk of this report, I must also, of course, mention the animal welfare scheme, which was introduced just fairly recently. And again, the work that is being done there and the reassurance that that provides to the public, I think, is absolutely invaluable. So I'm really pleased with this report. I'm delighted with the work that the volunteers are doing. And again, I'll pay tribute to them. But of course, any questions we'll be happy to deal with.
Thank you. It's a really encouraging report that this happens. And I have noticed over time that this has been coming. The issues that are raised are important, but not the ones that we're getting of a broken toilet and really dire situations in some of the custody suites. These are stuff that can be actioned really, really quickly. So I think we have definitely seen an improvement in the conditions of our custody suites, looking at these reports that have been coming regularly here. So no, our thanks really to all those custody, because I do, they go out in the middle of the night, don't they, as well? And, you know, it's all sorts of hours that they go out, and their dedication to the role is great. So, yeah, really pleased to see. Parishna.
I think I raised this last time when it was reported back. It was about the use of appropriate adults. So juvenile, obviously, that is under the age of 16, can be given an appropriate adult if parents is not suitable for interview. The effectiveness, of appropriate adults, if our volunteer managers can ask that question, their experience of appropriate adults and how they found it beneficial, or if there is any challenges or obstacles that we need to be overcoming, and taking back to the county or city that obviously appoint the appropriate adults independently. I think that would be useful information for both city and county.
Just in terms of appropriate adults, this is something that the LPCC has recently become involved in, so we can take that back and bring that back for you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this report? No, thank you very much. And on to item 11, the section 106 Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Is this a verbal update, Kira?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So not a whole lot to update on today, but just a few bits I just want to kind of bring to your attention. The Forces Section 106 Contribution Officer is now in post, been in post for quite a while, and actually is making some good progress, and has met with each of the district and borough councils in both the county and Rutland. They have set up separate bi-monthly and quarterly meetings, which are now in place with all the local authorities, so they can get updates for the Section 106 officers. Their priority over the next 12 months is to kind of maximise on that drawdown, ensure that they achieve the drawdown for any kind of agreements that are due to expire in the next 12 months, and then looking at kind of the longer term. But at the moment, their main focus is on the ones that are due to expire first. They have identified a number of projects within the force which they could use Section 106 funding for. At the moment, they've got about £1.3 million worth of projects. They've managed to draw down just under £900,000 of that. There's still about 400,000 that they're still trying to kind of draw down, and they'll continue that work over the next couple of months to try and liaise with each of the kind of districts and councils to try and get that money in for the force. There has been a number of new kind of expressions of interest put forward for new developments. So yeah, they'll go in obviously as they come up. And we've just kind of sent out 2 letters to local authorities, two of the local authorities. I think remember when we did the kind of review that some of the different authorities have different ways of working, and how we draw down the funding was quite difficult. So we have tried to review that with 2 local authorities, and that's on the review at the moment as well, so that we can make that a bit more of a smoother process and try and become a bit more kind of consistent across all the authorities. But that's the update for now. Thank you. I think
it would be good at the next time it comes to get us a chart of what you, from the original one that we had about all that money sitting there, what you've actually managed, so we can see it visually as well. And just for a point from my district at Charnwood last night, there was some money that had to be given back to developers, and part of that was policing money. So that was really disappointing to hear that. And they were saying they've got 1.1 million of Section 106 that's going to run out in 12 months. So if any of that's for policing, then we need to be on it, because giving money back to developers is not
and
what
I think
should be for, that money's there for to support infrastructure and support for all our residents that have taken this development. It
And
should be
I
only
think the section 106 contribution officer that we've got in force is kind of really trying to push that and prioritise that. So that is one of their, key priorities, to make sure that anything that's due to expire or is coming to, the agreement has reached its trigger point, that we are starting to kind of draw that money down. And again, that's some work we're trying to do with the local authorities, because like we said, some of them are very kind of, from when they were first set, they're very, the policing landscape has changed, so trying to repurpose that. But a lot of the money that we managed to draw down, we didn't need to go through the repurposing route. We managed to kind of still be able to draw some of that down. So that's a really positive thing, that we didn't have to go through that kind of long, possibly expensive kind of legal route, that we could repurpose and utilise it.
The ones that you're mentioning about putting in for new Section 106 money, are we doing that as a wider ask rather than
we won't be so specific with the kind of requests that we put through, as we have done in previously, so where we've put kind of an airway terminal or etc. I don't think it'd be quite, pinpoint down to that, but I think we'll be looking at the way we do that when we put in these new bids.
So that panel has made a huge difference going forward then. Les?
Dead right by the sound of it, because we started off with 7 point something million. Yeah, excuse me. So just picking up on the point of the variabilities across the planning authorities, is there, and there's one police force for LLR. So is there, if you've not done it, is there a potential opportunity to actually sit down with all the chief planning officers together in the same room and agree a flexible wording that the police can submit, rather than going into these tiny little, it's got to be this compliant, it's got to be that, actually, because it was the strictness around the wording that was the problem. And actually we know, because everything evolves, and the chair clearly wants lots of AI in the system. So is there an opportunity to sit down collectively with all the chief planning officers and agree a flexible wording, so you guys save time, they save time, and you can draw it down as and when you need it for the things that you need at that point in time?
So we did have a meeting, but it was quite a while back, where we did with quite a few of the planning officers, and we had quite a good turnout, where quite a few of them from different local authorities did turn up, but that was more around the repurposing. But I think there's definitely some kind of an opportunity for us all to kind of sit down, because I think one of the problems that they're having is that some will say they want the works to already completed, and then and before they release the money, others will release the money, and that's the inconsistencies that they're forced to having, and that makes it difficult for the planning. So I think that's where we have written out to the two local authorities slightly different in their kind of approach, and to try and make it more of a standardised approach for all local authorities, just so that when we are drawing down funds, it can make it easier and kind of. But yeah, there's definitely some opportunity.
I think if we can pull back, Chair, so I'm very happy to push it from my side of the world. All authorities have a chief planning officer. They do. So you're talking about 8 across the whole, 9 across the whole. When it's a school or play equipment, it's dead simple. It's there, it's in that particular community. The LLR has no geographic boundaries other than LLR. A police officer will go where they are needed, especially the response teams. And I just think we've got to get better equipped to claim that money down, because of the population growth in this area that are coming on the back of those developments. So I really think, if you can, pinning the chief planning officers down, all in the same room, all at the same time, and getting a common statement would be the ideal, if it's possible. So I wish you well with that one.
Well, most of us are elected members here, so I'm sure we can have something, but I've always offered to come and assist with that if you need any help with that. Any other questions on Section 106? But I think a written report to see progress would be really good to see. It's a bit hard when it's verbal, but good to see some movement in there. Okay, item 12, dates of the future meetings. So our next one's Monday the 23rd of September 2024, and then item 13, any other items that are urgent. There's no other items, so I'll draw the meeting to a close. And thank you very much, and welcome to all our new members on panel. Thank you very much. Have a good summer.